societal transformation and contribution of Rhoda, and I will be taking policymaking and governance. A very warm welcome to one and all. I am Advocate Kangan Rhoda, and I will be taking you through the event. Guests of honor here, and I would want them to join us for Prajvalan, lighting of the lamps. Please, sir. Please, sir. To join us for national song Vande Mataram.
Vande Mataram Malayaj Sheetala Sasya Shyamala Mataram Vande Dayamini Sumita Drumadala Shobhini Suhasini Sumadhura Bhashini Sukhadam Varadam Mataram Vande Mataram Vande Mataram.
Thank you, everyone. I would now like to invite the President of Young Advocates, Mr. Satya Ranjan Swen, to address the guests and the participants.
Namaste, everyone. Good evening. Respected Sri Bhupendra Yadav ji, Honorable Union Minister, Mr. Mahesh Jethmalani ji, Honorable Member of Parliament, Rajya Sabha and Senior Advocate, Mr. R. Venkat Ramani, Honorable Attorney General for India, who will be joining us soon, Dr. Anirban Ganguly, Honorary Director, Dr. Syama Prasad Mukherjee Research Foundation and mentor Y20, Mr. Suyas Pandey, Y20 Track Chair and Advocate, and off the dais, Mr. Jayant Mehta, Senior Advocate, Ms. Garima Prasad, Senior Advocate, Mr. Chetan Sarma, Sir, Additional Solicitor General, Mr. Ramesh Gupta, Senior Advocate, Mr. Patjoshi, Senior Advocate, Mr. Birender, Sir, Senior Advocate, other Senior Advocates present here, colleagues, last but not the least, my dear young advocates. Why I say this
Join us for
is
national
2020, and I say this is sui generis because under this Y20 banner, there are multiple programs being organized. One, G20, where legal fraternity is involved. I say this is sui generis because under this Y20 banner, there are multiple programs being organized. In this program, we will be discussing about the new ideas, different themes, which will for the first time, and this is the first one, and have a lasting legal impact is involved in the governance of this country. We will talk about position and role of young advocates in this program. In India's transformation, we will be discussing about new ideas in this which program. Significantly, we will be discussing about the impact and have a lasting impact taken by statutory bodies like Bar Council we will talk of India about position and role of the young advocates discussing about the functioning of the Honorable Supreme Court, vis-a-vis in this the parliamentary program, supremacy. We will be discussing about the impact
aspire
of
to be
the
a
recent
5
decisions
trillion
taken by
US
statutory
dollar
bodies
economy
like
in
Bar Council of
2025,
India. And last
we
but not the least, we will be discussing about the
proclaim
functioning
that
of the Honorable Supreme Court
21st century
vis-a-vis
is India's
the parliamentary
century.
supremacy. India should have,
If we
or
aspire to
India's,
be a 5
India should be a
trillion US
greatest
economy in
contributory to the
2025,
solution of
and we
global challenges that the world is facing
proclaim
today.
that
It is
21st
imperative
century
that
is
we
India's
keep
century.
pace with different dimensions
India should
and
have
different developments
India's,
in various
India
segments,
should be a
and most
greatest
particularly
contributory
in law to the solution of
I am
global
most delighted
challenges
to
that the
see
world is facing
that my
today.
young team
It
has
is
organized
imperative
this beautiful
that we
program
keep pace
today
with different
and
dimension and
not
different
in the distant
developments
past,
in
we
various
have
segments,
organized
and most particularly
programs
of relevance
most delighted
and
to
which
see
were of the
that
talking
my
point
young team
at that
has
time.
organized this beautiful
Those
program
programs still
today,
find mentions
and
in the legal,
not in the
between
distant
the legal
past,
fraternity,
we have
and we still
organized
cherish those
programs of
I am so grateful to the guest of honors and our panelists
talking point
who have
at
taken
that
out
time.
their time and has given their kind consent to be part of this program today. Here we have young advocates who are eager to learn. In 2017, I had the opportunity to represent India as the national leader of India in SIF for World Youth Program. I take the liberty to extract the theme of that program because that is relevant for here also. The theme was BLOOM, Bloom. Now, Bloom stands for be a leader and open others' mind. So here is the opportunity for all of you to learn from the legal fraternity and the seniors who are here with amongst us and take the teachings and the lessons forward. My respected speakers, we have taken inputs from the young minds on the topic of the day. The moderators will be posing all those questions to you during the respective sessions. And last but not the least, the gain of today's engagement is to accumulate the sound legal view. The objective is to show what India is all about. This will be an insight to India's legal system. This will highlight the in-depth understanding of what India is and what India has to offer. If I may quote what the US administration point person for South and Central Asia said, India's leadership in G20 further broadens its capacity to stand as a, I quote, a force team. Extend my warm greetings and wishes to all of you and welcome you all. I request my friend Ms. Kangan to take the proceeding forward. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Swen, for setting such a powerful tone for the event. I would now like to thank our esteemed guests for joining us today here, and I would like to call on stage Kautalya Birath and Mr. Puneet Dhawan for honoring Mr. Bhupinder Yadav, the Honorable Union Cabinet Minister for Environment, Forest and Climate Change, and Labor and Employment. Mr. Mahesh Jetmalani, Honorable nominated MP of Rajya Sabha and Senior Advocate. And Shriya Nandini to honor Dr. Anirban and mentor Y20. Please. Thank you, sir. I would now like to invite Mr. Yadav to give the keynote address for the audience. Please.
My dear friend, Shri Mahesh Jetmalani ji, the President of Shyama Prasad Mukherjee Foundation and the in charge of Y20, my friend Shri Anirban ji, the dignitaries on dais, so many my colleagues are sitting here, and dear friends. when the invitation to participate in the inaugural session of a Young Lawyers Meet was extended to me, I readily agreed to come because I always feel proud that I belong to this fraternity. And being amid young lawyers is like being amid the younger members of the family. A very energizing and refreshing experience. This is also a significant forum because it is a Y20. U20 has emerged as a vibrant forum for the young from all G20 member countries to establish dialogue with each other assumes greater importance. It is extremely significant that we are meeting G20 members represent 85% of global GDP. The G20 countries, G20 presidency reflects the sense of understanding of this responsibility in saying Vasudev Kutumbakam. Though its presidency, India is showing resolve to ensure the G20 nations are working to ensure economics is not devoid of morality. G20 encourages the youth as future of the raise awareness of global issues, exchange ideas, argue, negotiate, and reach consensus. Need I say that lawyers have a very critical role to play in the building this future leadership that is consensus-oriented and that has a global appeal. Lawyers are agents of social transformation. From the framing of the Constitution to ensuring constitutional values, our upheld lawyers have continue to play a critical role. And I would like to take a moment to talk about the word transformation itself here. When we talk about transformation, we feel that which is transformed is completely different from the which is existed. My own sense is that this is the process of building upon what we have to make it better, to make it suitable, and these young lawyers meet has taken up two very crucial issues for panel discussion today. The advent of foreign law firms, and second about the parliamentary supremacy or judicial overreach. Are these issues related to social transformation? Do the floodgates for foreign law firms make or judicial overreach new and a result of the way in which society is being molded? More practical way to find answer would be find how we reach the questions itself. The subject for the panel. These statements are chosen because of a particular purpose. Do these statements concern individual interest? Do they concern the interest of legal fraternity? Or do they concern the interest of a society? It is important to have this clarity when we set out on two important aspects here, but urging for its application in all our work as lawyers. This deals with the issue in a logical manner. We have a question in mind. We have logic is correct or incorrect. To begin with, all young lawyers like you must ensure there is a coherence in your statements. When our and present a fluid argument, logic ensure an uninterrupted flow of thoughts and example. Let me give you a three-step formula to it. First, lay out each premise clearly. Second, provide example for each premise. And third, source pool of talented people. They are young like you. They are hardworking and they have the will to achieve greater heights. The good news is the world is yours to take. In the field of arbitration and mediation, numerous opportunity exists you not just in India, but world over. See, with all of our diversity, our legislative structure are strong. Pre-independence, we amended the constitution as per the need of the people. These amendments were endorsed by our courts. Such instances have been example for our legislative maturity. Our roots, the Indian judicial system of people. We as a part of federal, when I began practicing as a lawyer, we use them to make our argument sound cogent and heavy. And Mahesh ji is also here, and most of lawyers in India have come, but I soon or judicial framework of Indian societal norms. It is time to turn Indian maxims and Indian logic. Why I am saying this? And so, where we should looking for the answers? I found mine in here and many sutras, but I only want to quote the Sutra 32, and that is the heart of Nyaya Shastra. It says, Pratigya hetu udharan upnaya nigmanani avyava. That means a proper argument. Pratigya, here is the meaning of the pratigya is the proposition or hypothesis. The hetu means the reason. Can be positive or negative. The third word which is mentioned here is the udharan. Meaning of udharan, the general rule. That which is independently confirmed or confirmable. And fourth word is here, upnaya, that means the application of the rule. That means it may be a validity test or example of the instance. And that is and for logic, important for good argument. So we are having a proper philosophy to interpret the law in our societal norms. But to come to this nigmanana means conclusion, share either doubt. Then we can come to the conclusion. Curiosity will allow reaching the conclusion through imagination. The sanshaya or doubt will allow one to even look at the point of the opposition too. If we apply this way of thinking to come to conclusion, we will get clarity and reach a constructive outcome. Friends, as India leads the G20 discussion available around, so Google says, or what Western expertise mixed with Indic knowledge. I have been traveling to many parts of the world and I have come to realize that societal norms or labor laws or ones I am facing every month in any, with these thoughts to work on, I wish you have a fruitful discussion and each of your returns enriched. Thank you for having me and thank for your patient listening. Jai Hind.
Thank you so much, sir, for such an insightful address to start the event. Now I would like to invite Mr. Varun Malik and Dipanshu Beniwal to felicitate Shri Suyash Pandey, Y20 Track Chair and Advocate Supreme Court. I would now like to invite Mr. Sahaj Garg to felicitate Mr. Ramesh Gupta, Senior Advocate. Felicitate Mr. Ramesh Gupta. I would like to invite Kumar Gautam to felicitate Mr. Ramesh Gupta, Senior Advocate. I would like to request Vivekanand Mishra to felicitate Birendra Chahar, Senior Advocate. I would now like to request Suman Mahapatra to address Santhanan Krishnan, Senior Advocate. I would request Sanjay Pal to address, to honor Santhanan Krishnan, Shri, Senior Advocate. Thank you, sir. Now, moving forward, I would now like to invite Dr. Anirban Ganguly to address and give his remarks. Please, sir.
Thank you so much. After a very, I think, a very thought-provoking address by Honorable Minister Shri Bhupender Yadav ji, it has set the theme. And I am unfortunately extremely inarticulate and legally illiterate. So I would take the shortest time since it's my formal duty to set the theme. It's a fortuitous, perhaps a coincidence that Dr. Shyama Prasad Mukherjee Research Foundation was designated as the Secretariat for Y20. Besides his many other achievements, Dr. Mukherjee was also an accomplished lawyer, and his contributions, therefore, to the legal fraternity pre-independence is something which is very unique. Since then, after Dr. Shyama Prasad Mukherjee Research Foundation was designated as the Y20 Secretariat, we had been mulling over this idea of having such a program. And Satyaranjan is absolutely right. This is the first of its kind in India. We have had nearly 300 plus programs across the country in the last 3.5 months, keeping in mind Prime Minister's appeal for Jan Bhagidari. These programs have percolated right at the grassroots. It has gone beyond universities, beyond five-star hotels. It has gone beyond industry forums. It has actually percolated at the grassroots. And at this point of time, to have such a high-powered program, a discussion, I think this adds to the entire deliberation that Y20 has been focusing upon. And therefore, I would really like to thank the young advocates who have come across, the Young Advocates Forum, to have come across and organized this. And to have Mahesh ji with us is always an added inspiration. And we have been wanting to have him on a Y20 platform, and therefore thank you so much for joining us on this. And an array of senior advocates, legal luminaries, personal friends also who have taken time out to come here. I would really like to thank all of you. It is your presence which makes this exercise not only meaningful, but I think historic as well. Because this is building up to the final summit, Y20 summit, which will be held in Varanasi, in Honorable Prime Minister's constituency. And therefore, as we have done with G20, India's presidency and celebration of G20 has been unique. Earlier, there would be G20s. For the last 20 years, there has been G20s. And it would be a one-day affair behind closed doors. But in India, it has actually turned into a people's movement. And therefore, your presence here lends credence and support to that vision of making it a Jan Andolan and Jan Bhagidari. So thank you so much. I would like to really express my thanks. just a few thoughts, because Suyash is actually, he's the track chair of one of the verticals of Y20. And he's the one who should be actually explaining to you Y20, not me, because I've already gone on the other side of youth. But I think among the various verticals that we have in Y20, future of work and industry, developing 21st century skills, collaboration and innovation, climate change and disaster risk reduction, participation of youth in governance, democracy and policy making is again something which is unique to Y20 in India. This was a subject, this was a vertical which was not there. It did not exist in other Y20s all these years. We included this in this Y20 primarily because India is not only the youngest democracy and one of the most vibrant democracy, but we should also remember, despite all the homilies that we have to listen to on democratic index, health of democracy in India, the West today is seeing a democratic recession, while India and Asia is seeing a democratic resurgence. And this is not something which Indian think tanks or Indian experts say. This is something which Western think tanks like Chatham House, Bennett Coleman Institute of Public Policy, Cambridge, such think tanks have come up with empirical evidences, research and papers and studies which say that there is a disinterestedness in governance, in participative democracy in the West, while there's a resurgence in Asia. And if one looks at India, all of you are much more well versed with the state of democracy. And so therefore, this vertical is extremely crucial. We have a story to tell the world. The vertical on peace and conflict resolution is something again which is unique to India's Y20. Because we have a story to tell the world on how we resolve, or we have resolved, our conflicts which have festered for the last 2 decades. So these are some of the dimensions of Y20. There's a lot of intense discussion that is going on at various levels across the country with a lot of involvement. And I think as we near the final summit in Varanasi, it is becoming more and more intense with a lot of ideas being thrown up. And if we keep this at the backdrop, this particular exercise and the panel discussion which is going to follow will, I think, give in a lot of input which can be included, or which can be put in the process for inclusion in the final summit document. And so thank you so much for being so patient. Thank you so much for being here. At the end, there are just 2 things that I want to say. I think this is the right time to tell the world and remember that in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, man was changed to human beings by Hansa Mehta, and that was something unique to India. And it is only India which is an Indic thought, as Bhupenji said. It is the product of an Indic thought. 1. And 2, again, a product of the Indic thought was when the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, when H.G. Wells started discoursing on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Gandhiji said that I accept the Universal Declaration of Human Rights on one condition: if there is a Universal Declaration of Human Duties. So I think as we move towards the finale of India's G20 presidency, the sense of duty in a democracy, duty and republic, duty and constitution, these are something which is, again, unique to India and unique to Indic thought. Thank you so much, and thank you, the young advocates and organizers and the entire team. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. Indeed, young lawyers, they are indeed the future, and I'm sure that contributions will lead us long way, not just in India, but globally. On that note, I would like to invite Mr. Pandey for his remarks.
आदरणीय श्री महेश जेठमलानी जी, आदरणीय श्री अनिर्बन गांगुली जी, dignitaries of the dais, आदरणीय श्री सत्यरंजन स्वयं जी, the organizer, the entire organizing team, आदरणीय श्री विक्रमजीत बैनर्जी जी, and other respective dignitaries and distinguished speakers for today's session. First of all, I would request all of you to give a huge round of applause to the young organizers for this amazing event. Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam once said that for a young citizens of India, I realize that having a small aim or ambition is a crime. Therefore, as a young nation, for all of us together, having a minimum aspiration to work towards contributing for making India a superpower should be the very basic ambition. So we should remind these words of Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam to start our discussion today. It is indeed a great honor for me to be present here amongst all of you as a representative of the Y20 when India is actually presiding the G20 summit. Friends, since last few decades, we have seen that how the term youth or how the youth as an age group is getting prominence across all the international forums. And when it comes to the G20, I must tell you that with every G20 summit, the Y20 is emerging as one of the strongest voices of the youth across the world. The statistics tells us that more than half of the world's population comes under the age band of youngsters or youth. And in this scenario, India being the youngest nation with 60 crore plus of its population coming under the youth band is making a mark before the world, and we have got the G20 presidency this time. It means that we as the young nation encompass immense potential and energy to actually change the discourses, disrupt the conventional norms, and change the world for a better place to live. As a Y20 track chair, I am fortunate to deliberate the sessions for India's G20 presidency for the shared future youth in democracy and governance track at the G20. Friends, we all must celebrate that we are not only world's largest or world's youngest democracy, but also we are one of the world's most successful democracies, and we have proved this in the last 75 years that how thriving as a democracy we all are. And that is why when we go and look back to our ancient systems, we find that the democratic ideals were present during that time also. This is why we are calling ourselves as the mother of democracy. And believe me, my friends, no nation at the G20 summit has objected to this particular norm of India calling itself as mother of democracy. So a huge round of applause for our ancestors who made this possible. As we are calling ourselves as a mother of democracy, it is the vision and mandate of our Honorable Prime Minister that this should be reflected in our every conduct, in our every action, and in our spirit. That is why it is the twofold mandate of the Y20 from the Honorable Prime Minister only, that first, deliberate with the G20 member nations on the pressing issues for the global youth. Secondly, reach out to the common youth across the nation, go seek their ideas and inputs on these pressing issues, and then represent India before the global forum. And that is why Y20 is going into every strata of the society. Friends, I am eagerly waiting to listen to the ideas of our seniors on the very two relevant topics for the panel discussions today. I would very briefly like to tell you about what we are doing in this particular track of shared future, youth in democracy and governance. As Anirbanji told, we are focusing on the issues which were never discussed earlier by any G20 presidency. That is youth's role in legislature and politics, youth's role in the governance and policy, youth's role in community governance, and very importantly, the role of youth and the institutionalization of youth leadership for preparing the youth to take the leadership positions in the future. When we talk about youth in governance and policy, it certainly includes the effective role of youth in the criminal justice or the legal justice system across the world. This topic is not a very widely discussed topic, but this time in the Y20 summit, we are discussing the role of youth in the justice system as well. As we are discussing the theme of this particular event, that is lawyers and societal transformation, youth in policy making and governance. So when we talk about governance, who can be a better fraternity than the lawyers to reach out and ask for their contribution? Lawyers are naturally social engineers. History is evident that when a lawyer takes interest in governance affairs, we get a Mahatma Gandhi, B.R. Ambedkar, to Arun Jaitley, to Sardar Patel, to Sushma Swaraj, to Ram Jethmalani, to one of the very distinguished guests sitting here, Shri Mahesh Jethmalani ji as well, when it comes to about the role of lawyers. We must thank Mahesh ji that he is playing the role, he is serving the two very important pillars of democracy as of now. He is at the courtrooms and as well as at the parliament. He is guiding the nation on the very important constitutional issues. Similarly, Shri Bhupender Yadav ji, who also happens to be a lawyer who was here with us, is spearheading the unprecedented labor reforms in India. From my experiences of the very recently concluded Y20 pre-summit at Leh, Ladakh, wherein the delegates of approximately 20 plus nations participated, which included the G20 member nations and the invited nations, I can vouch for one thing, that India this time is actually bringing the Vasudev Kutumbakam into action. And the world is seeing, we are giving a hope to the world that a new world order can also be there, which is free from the conventional conflicts of war and trade. Once again, I am thankful to the organizers here for having us to interact with you, and also to all the learned participants. I must assure you one thing from the Y20 side, that this is not just an event, but your contribution to India's historic G20 presidency. Thank you. Thanks once again. Bharat Mata ki Jai.
Thank you for the address, sir. I would now like to invite Mr. Jethmalani for the keynote address.
Dr. Anirban Ganguly, Honorary Director, Shyama Prasad Mukherjee Foundation, Suyash Pandey, Y20 Track Chair, Satyanarayan Swain, Advocate and President, Young Advocates, my senior colleagues at the bar, young advocates, not that my senior colleagues at the bar are not young, at least they are young at heart. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I want to remonstrate with Dr. Ganguly for saying that he thanks me for coming here. This platform, the Shyama Prasad Mukherjee Foundation, is the most prestigious platform, and I am privileged to be invited as a guest speaker here. Secondly, I have to remonstrate with him on another thing. He says he's on the wrong side of youth. If he says that, then I belong to a schedule in the Antiquities Act. So I take strong objection to that statement. Now, in today's subject, there are two parallel tracks. One is about lawyers and societal transformation, and of course, youth. There's a second aspect to it, youth in policy making and governance. On those two subjects, the Y20 subjects, I will leave to the very distinguished panel speakers. I will not interfere in their discussion, but I will talk on the other theme, and I'll come first to lawyers and societal transformation. Now, it is a measure of the sharp decline in the participation of lawyers in societal transformation that since 1948, when the 348 strong Constituent Assembly was constituted, 250 of its members consisted of lawyers. 250 out of 348. On the other hand, India's present parliament, which is the 17th in its history, the 17th parliament in India's history, only 4% of its total Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha members, that is 795 members, only 4% of them are lawyers. That galaxy of lawyers, the Constituent Assembly, consisted of some of the most eminent legal brains that this country has ever produced. The Indian Constitution that it produced was the most transformational charter for a nation and its society. It encompassed within its sweep citizens' human rights, structures and systems of governance at all levels, center, state, panchayat, the establishment of a hierarchy of courts, reservations for hitherto oppressed sections of society, center-state relations, and even the objectives of governance, something you never found in any other existing constitution at that time, the directive principles of state policy, which were the objectives of governance, the end goal for governance. In short, it was a document that was sui generis. I don't want to use Latin after the rebuke which Mr. Bhupendra Yadav has given, but it was unique. It was unique, the longest, the most detailed and comprehensive proclamation of how Indian society was to be ordered. The nation has not witnessed any intellectual output since then of such magnificence. The decline of the role of lawyers in public affairs was in some way natural. After all, India is an independent country now with universal suffrage. The legal profession is undoubtedly, in a sense, elitist, while universal adult suffrage and the ballot box is no respecter of elites, but elects to our various legislators grassroots leaders. We lawyers, with our specialized education and the very nature of our vocation, court hours, conferences, research, and attainment of excellence, both in knowledge and delivery, have very little time for the mass contact that public life requires. Of course, there are exceptions. Now, lawyers are the very fulcrum of our system of administration of justice. Those who appear for the state serve to strengthen and defend its policies in diverse spheres. Those who appear for private citizens or corporation against the state uphold the liberty of citizens, whether personal or proprietary. Even those who appear for private citizens' inter se, amongst each other, serve to help in the adjudication of the rights and wrongs of a case, and sometimes even to settle issues outside court. In short, lawyers strive as officers of the court to serve justice. Our research and our submissions help judges in shaping the law and adjudicating disputes. in performing even that very limited role, though our actions may not appear transformational, we prevent lawlessness and we stabilize society. And there are those very rare moments in history when lawyers go beyond their everyday calling and serve the Constitution. The role of the bar, just before and during the emergency, will forever be recorded in the annals of Indian history. Almost to a man, the bar opposed the emergency and suppression of civil liberties that took place. Lawyers all over the country protested against the emergency. They filed pro bono habeas corpus petitions, free of charge, under the then draconian preventive detention law. I don't know how many of you now remember it, young advocates. It was the dreaded MISA law, the Maintenance of Internal Security, which became the most hated statute in the country at that time. Participated in seminars and rallies, even courted arrest, some being interned in jail, some escaping the clutches of law and continuing the battle for freedom in exile abroad. Since independence, that was the bar's most glorious moment. This brings me to the role of young lawyers in societal transformation. Now, you do not have to be a public interest or social justice lawyer to serve society. That is a luxury for those who can afford it, or for those whom ideology is more important than an earning. You serve society by serving your client so long as you serve them ethically. In doing so, you contribute to an ordered society, but ethics are paramount. 42 years ago, when I first commenced my legal career, the advice of my late father still rings in my ears. He said, "You lose your case, but son, don't lose your client. If you lose your client, don't lose the court. And if you lose even the court, do not lose your conscience." Losing your case and not losing your client entails the optimal amount of integrity and diligence. Your client should know that even though you lost his case, you did your best and performed with utmost integrity. You will find that he will retain you in an appeal and in other litigation which he may have. Never lose the court by harsh demeanor or words to please your client. Do not suppress judgments that are against you. Do not ever succumb to the temptation of tendering perjured statements or false documents. Most of all, and this may seem almost an axiomatic thing to say, almost something which is obvious, do not ever attempt to bribe a judge. In 42 years of my practice, I have traveled the length and breadth of this country in many high courts, many sessions courts, many district courts. There has mushroomed in several bars of this country a coterie of lawyers who are fixers. Their motto is, to be a good lawyer, you need to know the law. But to be a great lawyer, you need to know the judge. Now, this practice has to be eradicated. Keeping the streams of justice pure is a paramount ethic for a lawyer. Honorable AG, I would have mentioned you, but you were in absentia, so I couldn't. But welcome, and thank you for gracing the occasion. And finally, if you find that a court is being unfair or perverse, if you feel the court itself is subverting the law, it is your duty to be courageous, to point this out in the most polite terms, and even critique such perversity when it appears in judgments. Like all citizens, and that is the last part of the advice I got when I started my practice, a lawyer's ultimate duty is to his conscience. Now, If you have it in you to be a reformer, then by all means take up public interest litigation. The judgments of our court are replete, they're full of instances of the finest law being laid down in PILs. Lawyering for social justice is the most soul-satisfying task for any lawyer and a dream for a young one. Only make sure that the PIL that you're handling is not publicity interest litigation, i.e. self-serving with no public interest, or that you are being briefed by someone in the PIL who is furthering private ends in the garb of public interest. Other ways you can serve society and even perhaps transform it is by doing pro bono litigation for the poor. We have a robust legal aid system for which you can sign up. If teaching exhilarates you, it is a great public cause. Law students benefit a great deal from lectures given by practicing lawyers. By being a part-time teacher even, you can enhance standards of legal education, contribute in making better lawyers, and thereby serve society. You can also take recourse, you can also serve society by taking recourse to writing articles on the various platforms available, law journals, newspapers, and even social media. You can even, if you disagree with the particular judgment or believe it is contrary to law, pen an article criticizing it. The discussion of law outside the court room is as important as arguing it within the courts. Illumination about the law is not a monopoly of court arguments and judgments. Indeed, law's evolution is equally enhanced by academic discussions and articles in the public domain. You can even write letters to parliamentarians. They are the ones, after all, who make the law. Now, the other aspect of today's subject is about youth. I take it not necessarily only young lawyers, but youth in policy, but youth generally, not only lawyer youth, in policy making and governance. Now, towards this end, a lot of state governments, Haryana, Maharashtra, etc., have started fellowships that seek young individuals who could help support the implementation efforts of government in key areas. There are opportunities to work with political consultancies like IPAC, Samagra, or Fourth Line that cover areas ranging from election campaigning to constituency development. Even the Niti Aayog and union ministries have called for young professionals looking to make an impact and offer specific project-related opportunities lasting for a couple of years. One opportunity worth discussing more is the Prime Minister's Rural Development Fellowship. It is a 2-year program where fellows act as facilitators of development. They support the district administrative setup. It is an initiative run by the Ministry of Rural Development to engage young professionals with the district collectors and help ground-level institutions build capacity. In the parliamentary policy area, legislative assistance to members of parliament, LAMP, it's called LAMP, Legislative Assistance to Members of Parliament, is a fellowship which is a unique chance for young Indians to be mentored by Indian parliamentarians for a period of 11 months. During the course of the program, the fellows work full-time with an MP, providing research input to the MP's parliamentary interventions, and this requires following the parliamentary function and legislative developments diligently. The fellows, among other things, they brief MPs on important legislations, prepare questions, provide input for debates. LAMP fellows also engage with policymakers and experts from diverse sectors through participation in several workshops on important policy and development issues to understand the space better. The fellowship invites applications on a yearly basis and is currently accepting application till August 2023. Now, fellowships and internships are excellent mediums to bridge the gap between the policy governance space and young India's aspirations. I would strongly recommend that you take up these initiatives if you are interested in societal transformation and in taking part in policy making and governance. In the end, my last advice to young lawyers would be that with the power of knowledge and the power of speech, you will be eminently successful lawyers. But if you add to those skills the calling of your heart and the voice of your conscience, you will be legendary lawyers. Thank you. Jai Hind.
Thank you so much, sir. That was truly inspiring and encouraging. We have with us Mr. R. Venkatarami. We welcome him, the Honorable Attorney General for India. I would now like to invite Mr. Ajay P. Tushar and Mr. Anish Roy to felicitate Honorable Attorney General for India. I would now like to invite Sir for the keynote address. Please.
When you are in the company of my learned friend, Mr. Mahesh, you can't be but be young. You have to be young. And I remember my fond and affectionate days with Mr. Ram Jethmalani, who was as young as he was always. And in Pune, he used to be called Ramu Kaka. Right? But whenever he used to meet, when he was the Minister for Law and Justice and even otherwise, he used to call me my son. And that was a very fond, close relationship we had, and that continues with my friend Mr. Mahesh. I want to take you, before I talk about lawyers' role, a little global tour and a few ideas which have always traveled with me during my entire journey as a lawyer and what I may call as a social observer. I think when lawyers must be essentially social observers. Law is an essentially social observance tool. Without getting too much into jurisprudence, I think that's how we should look at it. Our country has given to us a great lesson that if there is one revolution which is important for us, is a rule of law as a non-violent revolution. We don't need any other revolutions. But how do we strengthen the rule of law as a non-violent revolution? Is a question that is answered by a wonderful amalgamation of law and how we look at law, how we transform law, and how we deal with the institutions of law and justice. Way back in 1968, when Europe was undergoing a transition, the clash between the West and the East, the socialist promise and the pre-market deliverance, you find students from Sorbonne University in Paris in the streets. In Czechoslovakia and a few eastern parts of Europe, you had students uprising. In our own country, 1970s, we saw the Naxal uprising. They were part of a history which we're endeavoring to tell the world that the deliverance can come through one particular ideology. That story has profitably come to an end. Deliverance can no longer come through one particular ideology. World, across the world, countries have learned this lesson. And if deliverance and the reordering of a social has to come, it has to come through a merger of a variety of non-doctrinaire perspectives on how do we reorganize our lives. One reason why we need to talk and always talk about engagement of the youth in the organization of ourselves individually and collectively is that it's only through both a wonderful, again, amalgam of individual and collective initiatives that societies can move through a peaceful and orderly transition. When there is no individual and collective coalition, then we have other avenues and methods where society endeavors to change, and they are too dangerous. When I was a student of Loyola College in Madras, studying physics way back in the year 1970s, some of our students came together and set up an association called the Indian Youth Association. And we thought youth alone can save India, because at the time when India was moving towards the transition from an experiment through constitutional reordering, amendments of the Constitution, Supreme Court intervening and striking down legislation, so on and so forth. And then the restlessness of the youth to move towards a great egalitarian society which the Constitution has promised to ourselves. So we thought youth alone can save India. And I'm sure that idea will always remain perennial, that it's not a question of saving, but it's a question of being with India. Unless you are being with India, I don't think you're going to save India. But how are you to be with India? That's why I said, having looked at dispassionately as a student of history, and how world has transformed itself from two highly competing ideologies into a world where we now understand that rule of law is one way of looking at things and only one way of looking at things. And how do we go about it? I don't propose to talk about the deficits of democracy. When Bernie Sanders has been a long time member of the Senate in US, in one of his recent books he asked the question, who owns democracy? Question seemed to be an oxymoron. A democracy means owned by the people, but are the people owning democracy? And what is that we can do as a youth, as lawyers, to ensure that everyone, every citizen in our country owns democracy? And how do we really go about doing that? Very important question. We need more and more debates on these questions. We need more and more engagements on these questions. I conceive that, well, many of us think that some parts of our Constitution is a social justice compact, like the Part 4 of the Constitution, directive principles. But I understand the very idea of a Constitution is a social justice idea. In the sense, power is no longer to be exercised by individuals or collectives or institutions at their discretion without being subject to any overwatch or supervision. So when the very idea of a constitution itself is a social justice idea, I think from there on, the journey for a lawyer or for who would like to ensure that everybody owns democracy is to see that every part of the Constitution really and virtually becomes a vibrant social justice document. Every part of the Constitution. When I say that, I don't mean again the way the Supreme Court is trying to look at it from certain entrenched positions of advancing certain ideas and things like that. I don't look at it. We have a lot of questions on what Supreme Court may or may not do, but it's not the place and the time to talk about that. But are we in a position to now shape by our vibrant, engaged thought processes and debates and discourses to infuse that element of rule of law and adherence to discipline in every aspect of our life into our institutions? So when I talked of deficits of democracy, there are a lot of things that one can talk about it. When you talk about deficits of our institution functioning, whether it is the court or the parliament or even our own families, families as an institution. So a lot of concerns which each one of us would like to raise and would like to have answers to them. But more importantly, that we look at the space available to us and to create more and more space available to us. I say that because for transforming an institution or an idea or to usher in a new understanding, we can and we must create our own space. Space is not given to us. It has to be occupied by us and created by us. When space is not created by us, we become only mere blind adherence to something or the other happening around us. But when we become active agents of transformation, then we are creating space for ourselves. Gandhiji created a space. The whole idea of Satyagraha is a space creating idea. So we are people who have created space by having visions about how we can enrich the lives of individuals and collectively together. So associations like this, I think, are important. And in a meeting recently when my young friend Banerjee was there a couple of days ago, we were talking about the importance of culture, the importance and the connection between fundamental duties and fundamental rights and so on and so forth. I narrated in the meeting something which I thought was important to be narrated again and again. When you talk about creating a space, we must create a space where all of us have equal participation. It's not a space I edge you out. And sometimes we have myths about, how democracy functions. We have myths about how participation democracy also happens. Ultimately, at the end of the day, whatever be the institution, each one of us with our own innate, endowed intelligence and our equipment, and coupled with our ability to nurture this intelligence and equipment in the larger social cause. Ideas germinate. Ideas germinate from somebody's mind or the other. They don't germinate collectively like a leaves in a tree, just about the summer is on. And ideas germinate from individual mind. But when they germinate, they become part of collectivity. And how do we really receive them, enrich them, improve them, is all what we need to do by this kind of engagements and associations. There are large number of concerns in our community and in our society. All of us are aware of them. And at a global level again, when thinkers, economists, people in public life begin to talk about and ask questions. Is liberal democracy the end of history? And whether liberal democracy has probably not to turn any more chapters. You have economies across Europe talking about the need to revisit socialism, the need to question free market and all the important questions being raised. So, when we have this kind of associations, it's important and more fundamental for us to keep asking questions which must disturb us, not questions which peace us. So if we don't ask questions which do not disturb us, we're not really in the process or the path of rule of law, non-violent revolution. And I must say, as an officer of this country, with a passport to enter into the way the government is working, I am beginning to learn statecraft the way I would have never known. And I must say, to the credit of this government, not because of any particular party, the inconceivable commitment and the extraordinary commitment of people working in the government to do things which are unthinkable and to achieve things which are, of Himalayan heights. I say great things are happening in the government. And if only we are not disruptive in our attitudes, but more willing to lend in each and every minute of our time and our lives, energies, I'm sure we'll be able to see more of them. There's no need for any, again, an ideological clash here. It's only important to focus on what each, every one of us can do as part of each and every part of the working of the government and part of the institution of justice, and beyond that, as part of this wonderful nation. One can go on to talk about this wonderful nation. We are inheritors of a certain sense of importance of understanding of life and its meaning, which no other country has given to us. When I say that, I don't talk from any hegemonical point of view. I say so because this country has produced and will continue to produce this very unique understanding of life and how do we live as a community and as a people. From north to south to east to west, thousands of years, people have lived together in wonderful ways. And how do we continue to enable this way of living together in more than wonderful ways, I think sure is a task before us. And engagements of the association like this will certainly throw a lot of gather a lot of a helping environment in the universities and colleges. So let us be leaders and in a sense, as I said, to come back to it, I believe strongly there's one important revolution, unfinished revolution, is rule of law as a non-violent revolution. It's very important to understand the implications. Please engage yourself in this great task and celebrate being part of our nation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the address, sir. I would now like to invite Mr. Kamal Dikpal to felicitate Mr. Aruneshwar Gupta, Senior Advocate. I would like to invite Mr. Sanjay to felicitate Mr. Rajesh Khanna, Senior Advocate. With such an inspiring and insightful discussion and the address by our esteemed guests of honors, I would like to bring the inaugural session to a close. As our Honorable Prime Minister said, I dream of a young India, and that is not constrained by any limitations whatsoever. I want the youth of this country to lead a life filled with hope and opportunity. A hope we all can, I hope we all can live to the inspiration drawn by him. Thank you so much, and I would specifically like to thank you all the lawyers from Tirupura who specially joined us for this particular event. Mr. Bidut Sutradhar, Mr. Dilip Debnath, Mr. Alak Datta, Mr. Arindam Deb. With that, now I would like to invite our esteemed panel for the first panel discussion on advent of foreign law firms, a frontier or floodgate. Please, sir. Mr. Mohit Mathur, sir. Senior Advocate, please, sir. President of Delhi High Court Bar Association. Shri Jayant Mehta, Senior Advocate. Ms. Priya Hingorani, Senior Advocate. Shri Apurv Kuru. Please, sir. Where's the tag? President of Delhi High Court Bar Association.